Good morning, everyone. Hope you're all having a wonderful day today. As you can tell, this is going to be a little bit of a different video from what I usually do, which is why this is coming out on a weekday instead of on Saturday like my normal videos are. Don't worry, there will be a normal Saturday video. This one here is also probably going up early on my Subscribestar, whether that's 1 week or 2 weeks. For those of you who don't know, Subscribestar is basically a pro to a kind of alternative to Patreon. They're very fond of guns there, so a lot of content that I shouldn't necessarily post on YouTube can go there. Now this video will, as I mentioned, it'll be there a little bit earlier, but there's also a lot of other content on there. For instance, you also get to have some input in what schedule my videos come out on, and you can give me more ideas and kind of what to do. So you have a lot more input on Subscribestar than just in the comments on YouTube. So if that interests you, go ahead and check that out. And of course, for those of you who are actually viewing the videos early, thank you very much. Your support helps out the channel quite a bit. But today we're going to be doing a 8,000 round autopsy on my oldest BCA upper. So this one here was my first 10.5 inch barrel and bolt, and I have also on the table my 16 inch barrel and bolt, which we'll kind of do a little bit of comparison to. But basically, this is my highest round count. I've had it for almost 2 years, and I have about 8,000 rounds on it. Now, 8,000 rounds sounds like a lot, but over a 2-year period, it's actually not that aggressive of a firing schedule. So we're going to go over kind of the wear and tear and where they're at right now. Now, in terms of the barrel, 8,000 rounds is quite a bit, especially considering that it's about 60% steel at this point. It should also be noted that for the first few thousand rounds, I had the standard Bear Creek Arsenal gas block on, which is actually a really good gas block. It uses a 5 set screw method, so you have 1 in the dimple and then 2 on each side going in from an angle, so it holds it in place really, really well. It's the next best thing, except for a pinned setup. The only thing that's going to be better than that is a pinned setup. But what we have on here now, this is a Cotton Arms adjustable gas block, so I have the gas tuned quite a bit down, which is going to help us save some life on our bolt carrier group. As you see them on the table right now, these have both been cleaned, so they don't have a ton of carbon covering them. The bolt carrier was pretty much completely covered in carbon. Now, over the 8,000 rounds, I have, of course, cleaned it many, many times, and I do like to run a little bore snake down my barrel at least every 500 rounds or so, or every time I think about it. So one of the first things that we're going to look at is the barrel. So we're just going to go over the barrel, and then we'll go over the bolt carrier group because it's a little bit more complicated later. First thing is we're going to talk about the threads up front. It's 1/2 by 28. This is a 5.56 1 in 7 twist 10.5 inch barrel. It's actually the exact same profile that's on the 16 inch, just cut down 6 inches or 5.5 inches, whatever it is. But it's the exact same profile, exact same everything on the 16 inch gun, just a little bit shorter. Basically, now I switch out my muzzle devices very often, just testing different ones, going through different setups, that sort of thing. But every few thousand rounds, it's a good idea to take them off so they don't get carbon locked on there, because the carbon buildup on the threads is quite immense over time. Now, I'm not going to take off the gas block on it just because it's an aftermarket gas block, so I'm not going to hold it against Bear Creek Arsenal. It still functions really, really well, and as an adjustable gas block, for the 30 bucks I paid for it, or like 20 bucks that I paid for it, it's done an incredible job for thousands and thousands of rounds. But now let's go ahead and move to the inside of the barrel, which is of course going to be the more important part. Now, I'm not sure how well you can see it on here, but you can see that around the rim, around the edge where you have your barrel extension that fits into your upper receiver, the material, or the nitride, actually I think this is a Parkerized barrel, so the Parkerization on the front where the bolt carrier group slams forward and back is completely gone. So you have a very, very nice cutout shape of the bolt carrier group, which, you know, after 8,000 rounds slamming back and forth is going to do that. So now I haven't had any sort of like corrosion, like rust or anything like that, but you can definitely tell that that coating, that Parkerization, is completely gone. And in fact, cool little tidbit, it matches up perfectly with the wear on the bolt carrier group, which is kind of cool. So you can see that the surfaces were meeting up pretty well each time, because of course it's cut out in the same shape. Now, something that might be a little hard to tell on here, the way the camera is focusing, but the lugs themselves, I'll show you a close-up picture of this, but the lugs themselves actually look really good. The M4 feed ramps are in pretty much perfect shape. No rounding, no loss of material in there. So for over 8,000 rounds, it looks really, really good in terms of the lugs and the feed ramp. So no issues there. Now let's move on to the actual bore itself. Now, once again, I'm going to show you an up-close picture of this. But the bore itself is still bright, still looks good, but the grooves themselves, which are just the standard right-hand twist grooves, the grooves themselves are very, very worn down. They are almost non-existent. They have been just kind of worn down over, like I said, 8,000 rounds, probably at least 5,000 rounds of steel through this guy. So there have been a lot of really kind of crappy rounds. So over a couple years and 8,000 rounds, the grooves are kind of on their way out, which is kind of typical in a barrel like this. The barrel is of course 4150 chrome moly vanadium, so it's a really good barrel steel. And in terms of accuracy, something that I will mention is that we are kind of at the point where the barrel is kind of running out of its life. 8,000 rounds, a lot of that steel, we're looking at a degradation of accuracy of about 30%. So basically, when I got this originally, after about 500 rounds, when it was really well broken in, I was averaging a little bit over 1.5 inches with just military ball, just like M193 or something like that. And now with the same ammunition type, all that sort of stuff, we're averaging a little bit over 2 MOA. 2 MOA is okay, and it's definitely fine for a plinking gun, a home defense gun, that sort of thing. But for a high quality AR, 2 MOA is pretty bad. So now with super match grade ammunition, I'm sure you could still get down close to 1 inch, but it's definitely starting to degrade and starting to go out, which is kind of one of the reasons I kind of wanted to take it apart a little bit, because I was thinking about upgrading the barrel on my old 10.5 to a Roscoe 11.5, and that is definitely a much more high quality barrel. Not that this is a bad barrel, but it's a little bit more high end, and so it kind of elevates the build in general, having a much higher quality barrel, and of course a little bit longer. You get a little more velocity out of it, a little more dwell time, that sort of thing, to increase reliability. And of course, Roscoe barrels are very, very good. So that kind of does it for the barrel. So let's go ahead and set that off to the side. It's a good barrel. It did a really good job. So thumbs up to the barrel. But after 8,000 rounds, it's kind of showing its age a little bit. Now, next up, let's go ahead and take apart the bolt carrier group. As I mentioned, I've cleaned all of this, so there's no carbon on it right now. But we're gonna go ahead, take it apart, and kind of show you some of the wear and tear. Alrighty, so first up we're going to talk about the bolt carrier group, and you can kind of see right there, right up here on this line, that where it actually intersects with the upper receiver, the parkerization. Actually, this is a nitrided bolt carrier group. I want to say this is a nitrided bolt carrier group. The nitriding is completely gone on all of the contact surfaces. So if you look at that, it's very, very shiny. It looks like chrome almost, but that's how smooth the finish has become over about 8,000 rounds. And it's the same thing on the other side, as you can see along the gas key and along the bolt carrier group itself down here on the bottom. Everywhere where it contacts, it's pretty much chrome smooth almost. Now let's go ahead and flip it over, and a little bit down here on the rails on the bottom sides right there where it's again pretty much gone. It's very smooth, almost a chrome-like finish on there. There you go. You can see it really nice there. It's almost looks silvery white. Another interesting point is right here where it intersects on the hammer. So where this is where it resets your hammer every time it fires. It's actually rounded, so it has a very nice, interesting looking edge on there that's again completely silverish because that nitriding is completely gone. Along the rail here where it kind of also hits the hammer a little bit as it kind of drags over top, that finish is not 100% gone, but it's about 80% gone. So it's almost a bright finish on there, but there's still a little bit of that nitriding holding on. Now I want to show you really quick the staking on the top. The staking on the top is okay. It's not great. You can see the little screws on there. They're fine. They're nothing special, nothing to write home about. But it's done a good job. They have never come loose on me on this, and obviously I haven't had to replace them or anything like that. So for all intents and purposes, the staking on the top has worked just fine. Now let's go ahead, kind of roll it around, and there you get a really good shot of what the front of the bolt carrier group looks like. As I mentioned, you can see where that impacts the barrel extension that fits into your upper receiver, and because this material is completely gone in the exact same shape that's gone on the barrel itself, which let me pull that over here so you guys can see it. And as you can see right there on the barrel itself, again you have that interesting little marks on it where the barrel material is completely gone on the outside. Alrighty, now we're going to move on to the bolt itself. So the bolt carrier, I would say the wear is minimal. Honestly, the bolt carrier will last pretty much forever as long as your gas key, the staking on it doesn't come off and the screws don't come out, the bolt carrier itself is going to last for a very, very long time. Now right here you can see the bolt itself. Surprisingly enough, the gas rings are still doing okay. You can kind of see that they've kind of been worn out along the edges, and they've almost looks like they've almost kind of like melted together. They're very solid at this point. There is a lot of carbon built up along the back of the bolt here, which is to be expected. Now this is something that I do clean fairly often, so probably every few hundred rounds, maybe every 500 rounds at the longest time, I do actually clean this. So it is actually in fairly good shape. Right there on the inside you can also see where the extractor goes. Again, fairly clean. I just cleaned it out. And right there you can see this is an MPI tested bolt. It's very faded out in this point. The new ones look like black and shiny, and it looks really, really good. Not on this old one though. I don't think they're high pressure tested. Not really sure if that's a big deal, but they are MPI tested, which is, in my opinion, the more important one. Rolling it around to the front, you can see that the nitriding on this, which I believe this is a 9310, I want to say. I'll leave the description of this down in the description. But basically, on your locking lugs up front and the entire front surface of the bolt itself, all that coating is pretty much 100% gone. Now, something to note, the ejector pin here, or whatever you want to call this guy, this is still really strong. So it has just a little bit of movement, but it takes a lot of force to push that guy down. Moving on to the back of the lugs, it's probably a really good shot right there. You can tell that they are one missing material. So like right there on this one, if I don't cover it up with my shadow, this bolt, this locking lug right here, is missing material on the back end, and they're actually rounded, which is pretty typical on all of the lugs. Yeah, you can see it on there. All of the lugs are missing material on the back end, which is fairly common. Something kind of funny, Knight's Armament, their bolt carriers and bolts are actually rounded from the factory, which is, you know, they call it their proprietary thing or whatever, but that will happen naturally given a long enough period of time and enough ammo on any sort of standard AR-15 bolt. But overall, 8,000 rounds, very, very impressed. This is one of those things where the bolt itself is okay, the lugs don't look great, the finish isn't that great, so now you're going to have maybe a little bit more corrosion than you would otherwise. But honestly, for 8,000 rounds, being a really cheap bolt, back in the day when these were available and, you know, not exorbitantly expensive, these bolt carrier groups in their entirety were like 70 bucks. Next up we have the extractor and the extractor pin. The extractor pin is missing some finish on it, but other than that it's perfectly fine, nothing special there. Let's go ahead and set that down. But the ejector itself, or not the ejector, the extractor, sorry, is in good and bad shape, I'll say. So the O-ring is still good. It still has a little spring on the inside, which of course is very, very stiff, which gives a lot of pressure, which means that you're going to get really good extraction. I've never had an issue with extraction on this pistol, this 10.5 ever. But where I'm starting to get a little bit worried, and maybe you can tell right there on the front, is that there is a lot of wear and tear on the lip of the extractor itself. And if you look at it on a sideways profile, kind of like that, you can see that it's rounded on the inside edge where it shouldn't really be rounded. So after about 8,000 rounds, just natural wear and tear on the extractor is causing that inside edge where it actually grips the casing to be a little bit rounded. So not all that great. But again, 8,000 rounds is perfectly acceptable for me. It's not rated for 8,000 rounds. It's probably not even rated for like 5,000 rounds, or it is rated for 5,000 rounds. But 8,000 rounds is a lot, and the extractor is another one of those things that's probably on its way out. Like I said, never had an issue with it, but it is one of those things. It's one of those wear components that you just are going to need to replace. So overall, fairly good for 8,000 rounds though. And the last few components of our bolt carrier group to kind of round it out are the firing pin, which is a standard Mil-Spec firing pin, such as a stainless steel. I forget if it's like 416 or something else, or 17.4 or something like that. But it's never had an issue with light primer strikes, just using a Mil-Spec Palmetto State Armory enhanced polished trigger, which is a good trigger. It does have quite a bit of carbon built up back here on the back of the firing pin. Doesn't really affect function at all, but just something to note. Other than that, looks good. It's not terribly rounded on the front, so by all intents and purposes, still a fully functional firing pin. And then we have our cam pin, which, as you can see, I'm just going to roll it around a little bit, pretty much on the sides and everywhere where it actually interacts with the bolt in any way. pretty much all of that nitriding or whatever sort of finish material that they use for it is pretty much gone anywhere where it actually interacts with the bolt. And then we have our firing pin retainer, which functions as it should. It's never come out, and it's a fairly tight fit actually. So there was most of the Autopsy. Honestly, for the price I paid for it at the time, like 200 bucks for the entire upper receiver. That's the 10.5 upper receiver, bolt carrier group, rail, muzzle device, all that stuff. 200 bucks out the door. I think it was actually technically 180 bucks out the door on Black Friday. Really an exquisite deal, and you can get a ton of value for the money. And just to test the fitment for you, it's a little snug getting in, but once you get it into the right place, it pretty much just spins freely, which could be a little concerning. I'm not sure that they're supposed to spin that freely, but after 8,000 rounds, I'll give it a little bit of a pass in that regard. Alrighty guys, so there was the 8,000 round Autopsy of my 10.5 bolt carrier group and barrel. They both have a lot of wear on them. There's a few components that are kind of on their way out. The barrel itself, the accuracy is starting to degrade, so that is something that I am going to be swapping out in the near future. And the extractor is the main worry on my bolt carrier group. But all in all, for 8,000 rounds, for like I said, the money that I paid for it, you really couldn't ask for more value out of your money. And even now at the somewhat inflated prices of, you know, $300 to $350 that BCA is charging for their stuff, if it meets this level of quality and you guys are able to get the same amount of rounds that I am out of these, even for $350, you know, nearly twice what I paid for mine, still a really, really good value. One last thing that I want to mention before I end this video is I want to give a shout out to a gentleman who reached out to me on Instagram, a subscriber of the channel, someone who follows me, and he actually offered to Cerakote one of my guns. So I actually sent him the upper receiver and the rail that goes over this build, which is why I have these guys out and apart right now. So they're going to be Cerakoted a kind of burnt bronze looking color, and it's going to come out really, really good. That's going to be powder coated, which is kind of a magical way of painting. But I'm going to go ahead and leave a link to his Instagram in the description, and if you guys look at his stuff, you check it out, and you think it looks good, go ahead and hit him up because he's doing this for me for free, so I want to give him a shout out and say thank you to him for doing this for me. So that's pretty much it for the video, guys, though. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think of this down below, if you guys think this is a good value or if there's something that I missed on here that you guys were able to see on camera. So thank you guys again for watching, and if you feel like it, like, share, subscribe, and if you want to check out some additional content on Subscribestar, go ahead and do that. But that's it for this video, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace off.